The debate drama raging on in Pennsylvania's Senate race. Democrat John Fetterman finally, after intense pressure, agreed this week to debate his Republican opponent, Dr. Mehmet Oz. But not until mid to late October. And you know what that means. Early votes would be cast before people even get to hear from them. Dr. Oz calling him out, demanding the two men face off before absentee voting begins on September 19th. Fetterman responded this way. But let's be clear, this has never really been about debates for Dr. Oz. This whole thing has been about Dr. Oz and his team mocking me for having a stroke because they've got nothing else. Dr. Mehmet Oz in focus now. Good to have you. Let's start with his response. What's your reaction?
It's preposterous. And I could start talking about all his far-left radical positions, which is the reason we're winning this campaign. But let me go back to your premise that he accepted a debate. There is no John Fetterman debate offer. Debates have to be held at a specific time, at a specific place. They have to have a host. You've got to have a TV station. We don't have any of these details. He just threw out this head fake idea that, yeah, of course I'll do a debate. We'll get around to it. You can't have an imaginary debate. I've agreed to 6 specific debates. 3 in September. 1 was supposed to be today. 3 in October. And I'll do whatever I can here to serve the people of Pennsylvania. John Fetterman has agreed to precisely 0 debates. He doesn't have the interest of the voters at hand. He's dodging because he doesn't want to debate me. Because when I call him out for saying that 1/3 of all prisoners should be debated, and released from prison, and we've got the largest number of homicides ever in Philadelphia, it's a problem. When he says he wants to legalize all drugs, and we've got the largest open-air drug market in Philadelphia ever, that's a problem. So he should have agreed weeks ago to these debates. And as you point out, the absentee ballots are going out for 36 years in a row, Harris. And every time there's been a Senate race, there have been debates. Why should that change now?
I do want to get into something. And look, I usually preface this by saying we're not all doctors, but actually that's not true this time. And I know that you are a retired cardiothoracic surgeon, so you know what someone's health could be, a journey after having a pretty major stroke on May 13th. Fetterman did. And in fact, he underwent 3 hours of surgery a few days later. And it has been a lengthy stay out of the public eye for a bit since getting out of the hospital after 9 days. Talk to me about the challenges that a person would face and whether or not that plays a role at all potentially in the race.
Harris, I have tremendous empathy for John Fetterman's struggle with the stroke, the heart failure that has been around, we're now told, for 5 years. But he hasn't told me or anybody else the details that we would need to know to answer your question. And that's part of the challenge here. This is not about health. John Fetterman's trying to make it about health so people feel sorry for him. This is about honesty and integrity. He can't have it both ways anymore. Either he's healthy enough, which is what his campaign says, and he has said, so he's healthy enough to debate, and he wants to hide his radical record, a couple examples of which I just gave, or he's lying about his health. And that sends a very different message to the voters of Pennsylvania. And as Pat Toomey was saying in that little clip, and Nikki Haley said it yesterday, and Senator Kennedy's coming here tomorrow because all the Republicans are coming to help, we should have a senator who's capable of doing the job and fighting for them. John Fetterman should have to explain his far-left radical positions before these absentee ballots are mailed. And here's the problem. People on the California, New York, coasts who are liberals, Democrats, are funding his campaign aggressively because they don't understand how far left radical he is, and they're buying into his narrative. And if you are worried about that, because you should be, please go to droz.com and support me because I'm fighting for change. But these are issues that he should not be able to trick people with. Democracy is based on transparency. And Harris, it's not just about the debate. He has not answered a question on the campaign trail. Think about that. How can
he's got to do a sit-down.
Someone who they never spoke to?
And look, maybe he's taking a page out of President Biden's book because we've seen this from the man in the White House as well. Look, it can work if people look down the road and say, staying in the basement worked for this guy. Up to a point. When the former candidate, Joe Biden, was running, he didn't have record inflation height and all of that to deal with, and he's not sitting down. So you're making that comparison. It gets tough when you look at these facts. So when I hear you saying that other Republicans are coming and you use the words to help, let's take a look at where you are. You would be replacing a Republican, Pat Toomey, senator, but you're still 6.5 points down. Let's pop this up on the screen. I'm asking my team to do this. Real Clear Politics average shows Fetterman up still by 6.5%. I drilled down and looked at all of what they're taking an average of here, Doctor, and the margin of error is well below that. So my question for you is, With Fetterman willing to wear the invisibility coat, why aren't you actually leading? We can't even see really or hear from him. What's going on?
We're gaining rapidly. Over the summer, he took advantage of the fact that he had a lot of money saved up from his primary, and he was attacking me daily. Spent tens of millions of dollars portraying himself as a moderate, a candidate who's been a working person his whole life. The truth is the opposite. He's never had really a job, and he grew up affluent and not done much with it. And at the same time, he was attacking me on baseless personal charges. Here's the reality. As the race tightens dramatically, which it is doing, and as people begin to understand how radical he really is, the independent vote is shifting in my direction. That's where this election will be won. And I'm optimistic, confident that we will prevail in November. We got the right ideas at the right time, and he's unable to articulate a defense for what he likes to do, which is to tweet out ideas that sound good to him at the time, but make no sense and hurt the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I can go on quite a bit about the specific policies, but I'll just pick up on one you were just talking about. He aggressively supports open borders and sanctuary cities. Pennsylvania is top 3 in the country in fentanyl overdoses, and Philadelphia's ground zero now for it. The people of Pennsylvania all over the Commonwealth are done with that idea, and yet John Fetterman is doubling down on it.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot that people need to know. And if we got to see a debate before September 19th, maybe voters in Pennsylvania, those who would vote absentee, would get to see some of what you said and then get to hear his rebuttal. I don't want to make everything about the debate. There are a couple things to hit real quickly. You've had and continue to have support from former President Trump. Talk to me about that, if you would.
It's very helpful. He really gets the base energized. He did a big event here on Saturday, had 12,000 people, which is the capacity of the facility we were in. There were people outdoors waiting to get in. And I think a lot of Pennsylvanians are very hurt by what Joe Biden spoke of when he criticized 70+ million Americans as being MAGA. Folks here are worried about our country. They have strong family values, and they expect those opinions to be respected in Washington. And so this all carries me in the right direction. But I got to tell you, I'm getting support from across the board. People don't normally get along together or supporting me in unison because they realize the existential threat of John Fetterman. And for everyone watching who's not in Pennsylvania, this is an important point. He's already pledged that he wants to bust the filibuster, pack the Supreme Court, and add more states. These are positions that, again, they sound cool when you're tweeting them, but these dramatically change the nature of the Senate. He doesn't respect the office. And again, the fact that he would think he doesn't have to debate and can still serve in the Senate, which is the greatest deliberative body perhaps in the world, is shameful. And I think insulting the voters of Pennsylvania with head fakes about whether he's going to really debate or not, or what he would do if he were to debate, is problematic. And the Pennsylvania voters are on to him now. The major papers are even covering it, although they tend to be liberal. And I'm very, very of the opinion that most voters here are going to hold him accountable if he doesn't show up on a debate.
What you say, because the one date that popped out was coming from what I could see, a television station, and that was October 19th for this debate. So even the local media realized that everybody in the state has the right and should have the privilege of seeing the two men who want to take that important Senate seat. And you've just told us why it's so important 59 days from now, or 10 days from now if they should want to vote early. 10 days, it's coming up. Dr. Oz, thank you so very much for being in focus, and we'll talk with you again as we get closer.
Thank you, Harris.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.